I know I'm a little late to this, but the 11th anniversary Sprite updates are finally here. And good lord, some of these characters looks absolutely gorgeous now. But here's the thing though, if I just spend the next 10 minutes telling you how good everything looks, you could probably just look at the sprites yourself. And that's not really why I'm making this video. Because the more I compare these old and new sprites, the more I notice something weird. Some designs got cleaner but lost a little personality. Some barely changed, and some have tiny details that are way more interesting than the redesign itself. So that's what I want to talk about. It's not just old sprite bad and new sprite good, no. I want to figure out what actually changed, and whether better always means better. You know. But before we talk about the hot things, let me tell you that for me, these are my favorites. My personal favorites have to be Mozart, Leonidas, and Q-Alter. Seriously, what a glow up. They all have much better proportion now. Mozart's looks majestic. Honestly, this one is basically flawless to me. The jaw and head doesn't look weird anymore. The outfit has so much more details. Just look at that third ascension now. Look at all that effort they're going through. Honestly though, this doesn't look like something you get for free. Although I'm a little sad because now I can't make the joke about Mozart's head being bigger than his body. You know, if you know, you know. Anyway, Q-Alter also benefits a lot from this. His design has so many things going on. Thorns, fur, the giant lance. The old sprite made everything feel cramped, but now you can actually see all those details. In fact, I only now just realized he's actually wearing a long cape in his third ascension. Seriously, how did I never notice that before? And then there is Leonidas. Man, for this guy, they even fixed the fire in his helmet. In the old sprite, it looks more like a flaming mohawk. The flames were going on in every direction, and that's not really how fire works. Now for the new one, they actually flow upward. It looks much better now. Well, that was my favorite out of all of them. The perfect score for me. But how about the others? We still need to answer these three, and that's where things get interesting because the first redesign I'm conflicted about is Caster Jill. Honestly, I'm really split on this one. Don't get me wrong, okay, the updated proportion looks fantastic, no complaints there. But the thing that I really want to highlight here is the pose. It's the pose that I'm conflicted about. You know, Caster Jill has always been remembered as creepy. In the anime, he's constantly slouching, leaning into people's personal space. He talks creepily. His face and expression also support this creepy thing. Everything about him is uncomfortable to watch, and somehow his old Battle Sprite captured that feeling perfectly. Sure, the proportions were rough. The guy kinda looks like a bottle, but that awkward slouch posture made him feel unsettling. The new sprite gives him this proud, upright stance. And while it definitely looks cooler and more dramatic, I feel like this pose works better for his third ascension. I feel like this is his go all out pose. Like he's completely lost himself to madness. But honestly, if we keep the old pose for the first two ascensions, the only thing I would really change about the old sprite is just resize the head. Look at this. With the proportions fixed, the old pose actually works really well. Then for the third ascension, let him stand tall like this. I think that would be a way better set. It would feel like he's finally revealing his true self. And weirdly enough, Caster Jill isn't the only one that made me feel this way. In fact, this is probably my hardest take in the entire video. Phantom of the Opera. For this guy, I actually prefer the old sprites by a lot. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? The new sprite is objectively better. The proportions are cleaner, the details are sharper. And overall, he's much nicer to look at. But I think he lost a bit of what made him Phantom. The old sprite had this weird exaggerated look. His claws looked bigger, and because he was constantly floating with the head posture like that, the weird proportions somehow worked. He actually looked like a being called Phantom. All of that made him feel intimidating, scary. Now he just looks like a handsome guy wearing a mask. Sure, he's much cleaner now, he's much more polished, but I don't really get the eerie feelings anymore. And honestly, I'm a sucker for Ascension's poses changing. I really prefer how the old sprite changed its pose in the third ascension. But honestly, I think simply keeping the floating stance would have been enough. That alone would have preserved a lot of his identity. So while I definitely understand why they updated him, part of me still misses the old Phantom. Now those are the redesigns that I think, even though they're good, still lost a little something. But then we have the ones that barely changed. They are so subtle that you almost don't notice anything at first. And who else could it be but Romulus and Eric Bloodaxe? Sure, if you look closely you can see the changes of course, but honestly it's not that much. Take Romulus for example. Aside from slightly better proportions, the biggest change I can see is, well, the fact that they remove his gigantic bulge. Maybe that's it. And then there is Eric. Well, Eric is still Eric. He's still pretty simple. Pretty plain. I guess the most interesting thing about this update is that the fact they remember he exists. So, if he finally got a sprite update, I think it's safe to say that everyone will eventually get theirs. And Jekyll also kind of falls into this category. For Jekyll himself, I think the new sprite is definitely better than the old one. But the thing is, height barely changed. I was actually hoping they would do something bigger with him. I don't know, maybe a new pose or more aggressive stance, but I guess not. Still, I really like how Jekyll and Hyde looks now. Now for the last, there are also a couple of updates that didn't really change much visually, but they added details that I genuinely appreciate. This is not details like the missing bulge or flaming hair, no, this is more like a lore deep details. Let's start with Saber Jills. Honestly, this is one of those redesigns where I didn't notice the biggest change at first. Like, okay, he looks cooler now. But aside from the better proportions, there is one thing that caught my attention. He's now holding the Prelatis spellbook, and if you didn't know, the book was already part of his 3rd Ascension artwork. They just never put it directly into his Battle Sprite before. And I actually think that works really well with this character. Saber Jill's ascensions are all about his descent into madness. As he loses his armor, he also slowly loses his identity as a knight. So now, in the 3rd Ascension, with the sword in one hand and the spellbook in the other, you can literally see the two sides of Jills, the knight and the man who's already fallen into madness. It's a small change, but it adds a lot to his character. And then there is Mephistopheles, the clown, the devil. I'll be honest, I don't like his design at all. The color palette has never clicked with me. His posture feels really weird, it feels awkward, and even after the redesign, I still don't like it. Compared to everyone else, this is probably one of the smallest visual upgrades, but there is one detail that I absolutely love. He's left-handed now. At first that sounds like the most random change imaginable, like okay, why? But there is actually a really clever reason behind it. The connection goes all the way back to the Latin word sinister, which originally just meant left. Over time though, the left side became associated with bad omens, evil, and eventually the devil himself. You also have the idea of the left-hand path in occult tradition, representing rebellion, forbidden knowledge, and rejecting divine order, which sounds exactly like Mephistopheles. So making him fight with his left hand is actually pretty clever. It's a tiny visual detail that quietly reinforces who he is. Overall, I think this batch of sprite updates was a huge success. Sure, there are a few redesigns I personally prefer the old version, and a couple that barely changed at all, but seeing these older servants finally get some love after all these years, it's hard not to appreciate that. So what about you? Which redesign was your favorite? And is there a sprite you actually prefer before the update? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and maybe share this video somewhere. Thanks for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one.